Welcome everyone, I'm Heather Carlisle, and tonight we're talking about the sixth part of developing abilities as we grow up and as we grow through life. So the sixth part, let me show you this. See this circle right here? It's intelligence. So the sixth part, let me show you this. See this So the sixth part is intelligence, and we typically think about it as IQ. There are many intelligences. This is the one that we're most familiar with. We've now become familiar with emotional intelligence, which we talked about week before last. But this one, we have it at the top of our list in terms of wanting to make sure our kids get into the best schools, the best colleges, and are intellectually prepared for professional jobs so that they're smart, they're savvy, they're effective in the world, they're bright. Well, that is one of the large abilities that we develop. But there are more than just the IQ intelligence, and of course IQ has been separated into many parts. And so first thing, I wanted to introduce you to my simple model here because I want to make sure that we look at all the aspects that we want to have in our lives and to pay attention to as we mentor our kids. And as always, remember, if you're tuning in live, you can ask me questions anytime you like, and it doesn't have to be on topic either. Okay. So intelligence, perception, understanding, self-awareness, volition, which means I'm going to do what I know about and I have a desire to do something that I want or I value or I know about. Logic, reason, understanding numbers and math and physics and things like that. Language, languages, how to use language, the cognitive ability to know and to use language or languages, to recognize patterns, different kinds of patterns, and of course when we do an IQ test, it measures how we perceive all different kinds of patterns, and then our consciousness, our human consciousness, our cerebral cortex, how we think as a human being. That's the part that we develop. And then the next block to the right, that's how we express that or how we master it when we're learning. So that we have knowledge, we're able to be analytical, we can use facts, we can be creative mentally. We have desires that we're in touch with and we know what they are. We can talk about them. We have an ability to imagine. We're persistent mentally. We have self-discipline. We're decisive. And we do a synthesis of things. Then, when we have those developed, naturally what we want to do is use them. And use them to serve humanity when we're healthy. We want to implement it and make a difference in the world. And so this is where mission comes in. My mission, my calling, what I want to do that makes a difference. My work, usually my job or my career has something to do with how I make a contribution to humanity. The arts, inventions, things that we create, innovate, things that we teach when we have knowledge and we like to teach it, mentoring, our use of facts that we've learned that we have knowledge about, rules where we know how to structure things in all kinds of information. So that's the piece that we have on the table tonight or in this session. So we typically think about IQ or intelligence in this form. When I teach about intelligences, I'm careful to remind us that we have many more intelligences and that IQ really has many different dimensions. So if we want to look at that in the sense of classical research and the definitive work on IQ, here we have, this is directly from Wikipedia, which I trust and I really appreciate and use. So here you go. This is the Cattell-Horn-Carroll theory. It's famous, depended on, researched. And so he has a 3-stratum hierarchy of intelligence: general, broad, and narrow. And here's a list. So this is kind of nice to just check in with and think about how we got them developed in us, how we want to make sure to help our kids or the young ones around us or our mentees develop these and not miss any. So comprehension knowledge, see here, quantitative, reading and writing, short-term memory, long-term storage and retrieval, visual processing, auditory processing, speed, and decision reaction time. Then look at this chart. The narrow abilities are, and notice those are listed across the top that we just looked at. But then on the left-hand side, it's mathematical knowledge of it, mathematical achievement, reading speed, spelling ability, English usage, writing ability, writing speed, close ability. Those are all about reading and writing. So they've expanded each of these broad abilities into narrow abilities. So that's usually for people who are teaching education, people who are designing education, or wanting to really know the subject area. But it's interesting to look at these. I wanted to show them to you so that you're thinking about what you want to improve for yourself, because these are learned. We can learn these. And what we want to make sure that we offer, that we put on the table in a way that's attractive to the young ones around us, whether they're 2 or 20. So these are intelligence in the classical form. But I also wanted to show you something else that's really interesting. There are 27 intelligences. When I really started to research this, that's what I found. These are the ones that are classically taught. So here these are 9. Interpersonal, which is intelligence in relationships with other people, and that's about do we have the ability to have dialogue, to listen and to respond and to work together. A lot of that is communication. But some of it is about, how much do you need to have control, or how much are you passive? How do you work together using ideas and mixing them? This is the role in the complex world of executives, business managers, people that facilitate teams or conferences or, think tank. It's also for us when we want to manage a family and a family meeting and families getting along together. Then interpersonal, that's the interpersonal. Intrapersonal is inside me with the relationships with the parts of myself. And we'll have a long talk about that one at another time. Visual spatial intelligence. Some people are so good at imagining how things are going to... can you imagine the difference between an architect and how they have visual and spatial intelligence versus somebody who paints on a flat surface? It's a different intelligence, a different skill set. Naturalistic, about nature and the outdoors. And in a certain way, I think that some people are very attuned to nature and the outdoors, and those who are not don't have the sense of valuing of that particular intelligence and how deep it is and how powerful it is. Then there's, of course, we know this one well, logical and mathematical. Then there's the existential, which involves philosophy, spirituality, a sense of the journey of life, the cosmos, musical and rhythmic intelligence, body and kinesthetic intelligence, and of course we see that all the time in our sports, verbal and linguistic intelligence. So that's the basic 9 that are usually taught. Then here's one that's just 7. And then another one says streams of development, 13 of them. So I put down here my references. There's Howard Gardner. He's kind of the grandfather of this kind of thinking about intelligence. Daniel Goleman, he's the one who wrote the seminal public work on emotional intelligence. Jennifer James, Thinking in the Future. Thomas Armstrong, 7 Kinds of Smart, identifying and developing your many intelligences, and that's this one here, which has 7. Elaine de Beauport, The 3 Faces of Mind, developing your mental, emotional, and behavioral intelligence. And then Peter Kirstenbaum, The Heart of Business. He talks about intelligences. So here you are. Let me blow you away. 27 intelligences. Now, of course, this isn't just IQ or cerebral cortex or knowledge intelligence. This incorporates all of the abilities or intelligences, capabilities that we have as human beings. And I found this very inspiring to me, because typically we think IQ. And sometimes I think, especially when people are dyslexic or they have nature intelligence, they have an intelligence that is not the classic STEM subjects or literary subjects, but intelligences like musical, aesthetic, affectional, habit, narrative, existential, spiritual, moral. Sometimes those are pockets, but we don't typically think about those as something that we would pursue for a career, for a master's degree. I just want always to be very respectful of people, of each one of us as we are. To know that each one of us has our own path, and the journey of life comes for each one of us, not like anybody else. Of course, it's irresistible to compare, because we want to be worthy, we want to be loved, we want to be valued, and we want to value ourselves and feel good about ourselves and what we contribute to the world. It's devastating, as I've said before, when there's criticism, and that there is really no such thing as constructive criticism. So this list of 27 intelligences helps me be open-minded and respectful of people who have different skill sets, different intelligences, and looking for ways where they find their place, their tribe, their work in the world, which uses to the maximum their special abilities. And if you have any questions, please type to me. Thank you. Okay. Before I kind of walk into these with you, I wanted to share a piece of my work with you. So when we are looking to develop this kind of intelligence, oftentimes we're in school, we're at home, we're doing different activities, and a lot rests on how much our parents expose us to or interact with us about. And so as adults now in our time, and mentoring adults, because we want the next generation to have benefit of what we know today, we do know so much more just in the last decade than we have ever before, partly because of our ability in science to measure the brain as an organic entity and what it does, how it functions. We're also looking at people in a deeper and more complex way. We're assessing people, what they can do, what they can't do. Of course, we're looking for learning differences to support our young ones in their growth in the way that works for them. And as best that we can do without judgment, because we know, at least intellectually we know, that even though someone is not going to get a great SAT score, doesn't mean they're not smart. Doesn't mean that they're not highly intelligent, but in their own way. And that's a concern to me. I always want to be respectful, and I'm very interested and curious in knowing about the different intelligences, because everybody has special gifts to give the world. Every one of us does. And not like anybody else. And I want to make sure that the person doesn't miss out on developing and using their gifts, as well as I don't want the world to miss out on what they would contribute. So when we look at intelligence, it's very complex and it's very important. And if we don't get what we need as our brain is developing, then we end up with certain parts of our thinking processes or our intellectual abilities, they're stunted. And every once in a while, I will run across a client who has what I think of as stunted thinking. This is often easy to see when people are black and white thinkers, where they know that there's one right way to think or be, or they've learned a certain way of thinking and putting thoughts together from the old-fashioned traditions. And if they encounter something that doesn't fit that model or that way of thinking, communicating, and relating, then they don't know how to handle it. They're not resilient. They don't learn. They don't learn how to handle something unfamiliar. And that can get in the way. Can get in the way of having relationships with certain people and narrows down the ability to get along with a narrower part of your environment, your interpersonal environment. And if you have any questions about this, don't hesitate to chime in for me. So I want to show you how I made a picture of this. So remember the building blocks, this 6 intelligence, then 6P, which is intelligence purpose, and intelligence mission. So my purpose is to grow myself. My mission is to take my ability and serve humanity. So what if we don't get what we need? Or what if we don't get it in the way that we need it to be healthy? This is the way that I have taken it apart to look at that, so that really is obvious, and you've got it right away. You know what you're doing. So the circle down here at the bottom is intelligence. I call this, in terms of the archetypal role or the hat we wear in life, the thinker. So this is cerebral cortex, IQ intelligence. The thinker. So here's a little expansion of understanding that. Educated, fluid intelligence with reason, form, concepts, and connections in the mind. Being self-aware, understanding, being able to process information, to be self-aware, understand and think logically with reason, have a quantitative reasoning as well, short-term and long-term memory ability, communication with reading and writing and language and verbal skills, visual and auditory processing, mathematics, be able to manipulate numerical symbols, recognize patterns, decision or reaction time, knowledge or crystallized intelligent choices, and spatial intelligence. So that's a whole lot, isn't it? So human IQ is very complex, worthy of us as thinkers, as human beings. But people are only human. Who we were born to, when we were born, the environment we were born into, that's how we learn. And so there are two patterns. So if you look to the left, I've got a block which is the neglected child. And to the right, there's another block called the little genius. So this is like the continuum. The neglected child has a stunted mind, and the little genius child also has a stunted mind, which is something that is not quite obvious sometimes. So these boxes represent what happens with children. Then this larger portion of a circle, that represents what happens to us when we're adults and when we grow up. So we've got the neglected child is the impulsive thinker or the ignorant fool when we grow up. And then the little genius becomes the narrow-minded thinker or the know-it-all. So as usual, when I'm wanting to be very thorough, you know this about me, I know that there's a continuum. In the middle is healthy, and then we can go either way on that continuum, away from health, in a compensatory or a narrowed understanding of that human ability. And that's what I'm working to convey here. So the neglected child, which means the parents of this child, maybe they were absent, or they were illiterate, or they just didn't think that a child was ready to learn a high-level thought process, so they just give them things that are too simplistic. And this child has school troubles. If a child has school troubles, that's on us as adults. We need to figure out what's missing and provide it for them. Maybe ordinary school isn't enough for them or isn't right for them. No help with fun learning. Learning needs to be fun. Learning is naturally fun. And if people have had a hard time themselves in school or doubt their own mental ability or maybe don't have the right language, then learning is hard and serious and unpleasant or unsuccessful or frustrating. We want to help our kids to find out that it's really fun to learn. We can set it up that way. ADD, that's a neglected child. Attention deficit is we have not helped that child to focus their mind. That's naturally what we do when we read with a child, when we work side by side with them. I can't tell you how many young women or girls I've taught fractions and a little bit of chemistry and physics just in the kitchen making dinner side by side. Boredom. Kids can get bored because their brain isn't developed yet. They really don't know the whole world. They really don't know what they can do, like I in my own kitchen. There's never boredom necessary in my kitchen because we can always be up to something fun. It's just like going out into my dad's workshop or going out with a friend of mine who is a great gardener into the yard. It's right here in our homes. A lack of mental tasks with results. If the mental tasks are boring and useless or simplistic and a waste of time, why would you want to bother with it? We get ouch rage, which means we've been hurt in the sense that we don't have an experience so that we're mentally smart and capable. And then we get angry to protect ourselves because we feel inadequate. And then we go into what I call the robotic world, which means if I can't run my own mind and I don't have enough thought process and my thinking is stunted, it helps to calm me down by using mental stimulus that are avoidance and distraction methods such as screen time, virtual reality, TV videos, gambling, MTV, Xbox gaming. We get more ADD, ADHD, or cults and true believers, people that are seduced by narrow-minded thinking, and then being influenced by that, in essence being a sheep or a follower. So the other side is the opposite end of the continuum, is the quote-unquote little genius. So this child has been too disciplined, too pushed. They're competing. They'd get arrogant because they win everything. They may have black and white judgment. If you're not as smart as me, then you're less than me. They may be presumptuous about people. Their outrage, their hurt, and their defense is also robotic, because then they will also use mental stimulus with screen time and being seduced by the environment that's there rather than running their own mind. So notice it's too loose and too tight rather than learning to run your own mind. And so that's how I think of stunted thinking. So then let's look at the adult states that we see around us, or we may see in ourselves sometimes. If it's hard to look at yourself when you've got this kind of pattern going on. The impulsive thinker. And I call that the ignorant fool, because it's like this person ends up being unfocused, unschooled, they have attention deficit, they have a lack of mental tasks with results, they're anxious, and they have no fun with learning. This is the adults now. They have short-term thinking rather than thinking broad-term, past, future, present. They're bored, they're cynical, they have an undeveloped vocabulary, undeveloped language, little self-awareness, faulty reasoning, simplistic thought, mentally lazy, uninterested. And when we have this habit in our mind of being kind of mentally lazy, uninterested, cynical, those are the college kids that I really love working with, where they flunked out. Somewhere along the line, they experienced things that made them cynical and just unmotivated, not interested. Unless we can find something that they care about school, why would they want to do the work? So that's the ignorant fool, because if we have that negative attitude, it's foolish. We're cutting ourselves off from deliciousness and richness in life. So then the other side is the narrow-minded thinker, or the know-it-all. The person that is very stiff, very opinionated, cerebral, they're black and white, it's got to be this way, not that way, and I'm not going to listen to anything that's not my way. They're out of touch with physical reality. They're just looking at the black and white stuff. They have mental inflexibility. They're usually impractical because they just want it by the book, which just means not very resilient or go with the flow, not fluid intelligence. Too theoretical, the idea and the ideal rather than the real world and the real human. Narrow-minded, only one right way to be, endless studying, speculating, and scornful of lesser intellects. And that's sometimes the world of academe. So we want to protect our kids from this. And we want to see it in ourselves and relax, so that we know where we're good and we know where we'd like to improve. So thank you for tuning in tonight. This is my serious concern about when we have stunted thinking. And oftentimes, until we come up against something that is discouraging, or we're angry about, or we're kind of lost, it's, as you can see, it's a complicated thing to look at. Well, what about my thinking? So just to whip through this for you, Practical intelligence, the ability to think in concrete examples and solve daily problems directly. Now, we might think of this as just common sense. And you know that some people seem to have much better common sense than others. Then there's verbal intelligence. We know about that. Communicate effectively and creatively with words. And you've heard me say that the researchers of today say that the number one predictor of a child's capabilities is, if we have to say just one thing, it's the mom's vocabulary. How many words does she use while the child is growing up? So verbal intelligence is critically important. Logical intelligence, to think of and to appreciate abstract parts, symbols, sequential relationships, etc. And please just email me, call me, give me a message on my website, and I'm happy to share this with you so that you can look at it in more detail if you have an interest in it. Spatial intelligence, of course, we're thinking about graphics, computer graphics, architects. Intuitive intelligence, the capacity to know directly and appreciate whole or hidden patterns beyond logic. Musical intelligence, we pretty much know how wonderful that is, don't we? Aesthetic intelligence, the ability to produce, express, communicate, and appreciate in a compelling way. So, compelling aspects of verbal, musical, and spatial intelligences, and we think of it as compelling in terms of art, where we're attracted to something and we like it, we want it on our wall, or we don't like it and we want to get away from it. Body intelligence, and we've got movement and manual dexterity, but to appreciate and utilize our own body, however our body is structured to do well, and for us to enjoy that. Interpersonal intelligence, relate to other people's subjective states, to estimate their likely behavior. This includes, of course, empathy, which is a part of emotional intelligence. Social intelligence, also called team intelligence, and I help people with that quite often. Affectional intelligence, to be affected by, connected to, or resonant with people. Mood intelligence, to fully experience any mood as it happens, as it occurs, and to move out of it at will, to be resilient. So that's an intelligence there, to wield it. Motivational intelligence, to know what moves you so that you motivate yourself. Intrapersonal, the ability to recognize, access, and deal with one's own subjective or inner world. Inner worlds. Emotional intelligence, or emotional patterns. Basic intelligence, the ability to move towards what's healthy and desirable and away from what is unhealthy or undesirable. And this can be thought of as almost automatic or instinctual. Basic intelligence. Behavioral or pattern intelligence. Parameter intelligence, the ability to create and sustain order and predictability. And we're thinking about that lovely lady these days who is helping people organize their homes to create and sustain order and beauty. Habit intelligence, the ability to recognize, form, and change your habits. That, some of us don't even know that exists, that we can do it. Yeah, we can. Organizing intelligence, spiritual intelligence, narrative intelligence. That comes in really handy if we want to make learning fun. Eco-intelligence, about the natural patterns of nature. Existential intelligence, spiritual intelligence. So that's a slightly different way to talk about spiritual intelligence. And moral intelligence, the capacity to understand right from wrong, to behave based on the value that is believed to be right. 7 main points that build someone's moral intelligence: empathy, conscience, self-control, respect for others, kindness, tolerance, and fairness. Isn't that exciting? I'm really interested because I'm an inveterate teacher and mentor, and I want to know all about these things so that I'm sensitive to them. I hope that this is interesting to you as it is to me. And please, if you have any questions or you would like my handouts, don't hesitate to contact me. It's better in your hands than it is on my computer. And as always, know yourself, treasure life, and love others. This is Heather Carlisle, and this is about intelligence. I'll talk to you next week. Know yourself, treasure life, love others.